Hey, I'm Mac. Welcome back to my channel. As always, don't forget to like and subscribe and consider joining my Patreon for access to new videos 12 to 24 hours early. Can you believe that Toiletgate, when self-help guru and motivational speaker Rachel Hollis posted that infamous TikTok explaining how she has a lady who cleans the toilets, and the reason she can afford that is because she gets up at 4 a.m. and fails publicly, whereas most people do not get up at 4 a.m. and therefore they don't have that money? Can you believe that was less than 1 year ago as of February 2022? Less than a year ago. Wow, what a wild ride it has been watching Rachel Hollis and her now ex-husband Dave unintentionally deliver an absolute thrashing of the self-help industry overall by refuting their own garbage at every turn merely through their own behavior and the results of that behavior. I despise the self-help industry. And while in the past there have been slip-ups and screw-ups and gurus getting exposed, I really feel like Rachel and Dave Hollis have provided more evidence than I ever could have dreamed of ever getting on a silver platter, because they're privileged enough that they own a silver platter. They need platters. All I'm saying is, I bet ownership of a platter, especially one made of silver, is an extremely reliable indicator that someone is doing pretty well. What was I talking about? Right. This being such a perfect opportunity that I just cannot fathom squandering it. So they might be down or defeated right now, but I cannot pass up the opportunity to run up the score. So I'm going to be putting out some videos at a faster than usual pace for my victory lap to bring it all home about how Rachel, Dave, and all the other self-help and personal development figures out there are complete frauds. They're all the same and they're all terrible. And today we're going to start off with Dave. If you haven't been keeping up, 2 weeks before CronCon was scheduled to take place, basically as I was posting my last video on the situation, Dave apparently went to some kind of upscale rehab program for what was claimed to be intensive outpatient. It was never disclosed what for, but to me, someone who is recently over 3 years sober, it is obvious that he is spiraling in his alcohol addiction. Based on the fact that he appeared to still be posting on social media and having plenty of communication with Heidi, I have to say that I'm more than a bit skeptical with regard to the seriousness of this program, okay? When I went to inpatient detox followed by inpatient rehab, we weren't even allowed to have shoelaces, let alone laptops or cell phones, but whatever. Now, Rachel, knowing a golden window had just opened that wouldn't be open for long, releases a podcast where she dropped the bomb of an accusation that Dave had been living a double life when they were married, and then without giving really any further details, metaphorically puts on sunglasses and slowly walks away from the explosion without looking at it. Dave and Heidi, despite applying their expert level proficiency in general aimless flailing, are unsuccessful in their feeble attempts to continue making everything seem like it's totally normal, and the Hollis Uncensored subreddit figures out where he is. Wade cancels ConCon. Finally, Sunday, January 30th, Dave posts a statement to his Instagram. Here's that post. Are you ready? This is a really hard post for me to write, but I need to. Friends, I am going through it. Contrary to how it may seem, and contrary to how I feel I'm expected to show up as the happy person you know me to be, I am feeling completely broken from the pressure of this strange public life. And it feels the happier I've chosen to show up for you and for my family, the more unprocessed pain I'm burying, simply deferring to a later date as it collects at the highest interest rate. I've made the very difficult but necessary for my mental health decision to pull completely away from social media while I put in the hard work and figure out what is at the root of my sadness. My anxiety, my depression, all of the things that are so freaking hard to admit here to you all, as you've so generously welcomed me and my life changes with kindness and compassion. It's interesting. I've done so much work over the past year and a half, yet I feel like I'm only getting further from the whole. Further from whole some days. God damn it. It must be all the inside of that me. Fuck. I'm sorry. It's so bad. It's so difficult to read, okay? Yet I feel like I'm only getting further from whole some days. The currents I'm rowing against feel really, really strong, even with the strength I'm slowly gaining. This makes me sad to type because I have so much love for y'all. You carried me through the hardest time in my life. You gave me love and validation when I felt rejected from my marriage. And you've continued to give me the benefit of the doubt when rumors have come by way of internet trolls or unkind podcasts. I love you guys and will never be able to repay you for that. I appreciate the concern many of you have shown over the last week when I began my journey. I was trying to hold both working on me and being here for you and Heidi and all of my other obligations. But I realized this weekend both in a situation like this is not the healthiest. I'm going to be pulling away from everything but myself and my therapist for a while. I'm not sure when I'll return, or to be honest, if I ever will. Who knows? Maybe I'll find over these months that life void of social media brings happiness I never knew existed, ? This is what Heidi and my mom keep hypothesizing, at least. Regardless, it's time to dive in. Time to process those last few years of a move from California to Texas. From the pride of being someone inside of corporate to another's husband and small business. From married to my best friend. Married to my best friend to feeling rejection from divorce. From not being fully emotionally ready to date to not wanting the love of my life to waltz by me because of my unreadiness. And from very private life to what feels like a very public one. I don't know what the future holds. Don't know what next looks like. It's got me scared and nervous, can't lie. But I do know is that all great things are the result of leaving your safe harbor and working through struggle. Head on. Here I go, ... Heidi, I appreciate you. Your ability to hold space for my humanness while keeping me accountable is beautiful. So grateful for your support. There's never a convenient time for this work, and you've been the best teammate, never infusing guilt, only helping me feel safe. Thanks to Rachel for the immediate voice of support when I called 3 weeks ago and the quick offer to lean in with additional time with the kids. I know this is hard for you. To the joy of gossip on the internet, all my skeletons are known. I'm here in part because of having been such an open book. But for the record, the only time I've ever led a double life was when I was pretending everything was okay and it was not. Thanks to all you guys. Love you. If you see me around town, don't hesitate to come up and give the big guy a hug. It's what I need the most these days. The end. Okay, can we please stop misusing the word troll? The fact that someone dislikes or even hates you and says mean things about you might make them a bad person or a mean person or a bully, depending on the context and content. But that's not a troll. An internet troll is someone who interacts with you on some platform with the goal of getting you to get angry and react, maybe by like espousing some opinion that pisses you off or saying something that they know is incorrect so that you'll get frustrated and correct them, or saying something that you've just aired your annoyance with. And they don't say it because they agree with what they're saying necessarily. They're just saying it because they think it's entertaining to when you respond in anger. That's a troll. Okay, just wanted to clear that up. And for the record, not a single so-called troll was fooled for 1 second by your happiness facade. I guess it's just your true fans that fell for it. That's interesting. Big yikes. Despite how that statement may have sounded, he and Heidi are apparently still together, and not subtly. You'd think they'd try to not post what a great time he's having all over Heidi's Instagram and just have him lay low, especially on the dates when he was supposed to be hosting CronCon. But I guess that's our shameless king. I guess when he said he was pulling away from everything but himself and his therapist for a while meant like maybe till like after dinner. Granted, he hasn't posted anything on his profile, but still, not exactly being off social media. To me, the whole thing sounds like he's completely unwilling to accept anything that involves making any changes or giving up anything at all. And until that attitude changes, he's going to continue spiraling further and further, unfortunately. Which brings me to an interview I ran across with Tom Bilyeu, who, if you're not familiar, runs the personal development / motivational bro bullshit factory called Impact Theory, which he started after the success of Quest Nutrition, a company that he was one of 3 co-founders of, that is best known for producing the first ever protein bar created by hammering expired Tootsie Rolls onto jumbo sticks of sidewalk chalk. Because apparently we have collectively decided our benchmark of success is being able to market overpriced bullshit in a wrapper so that people will eat more synthetic, hyper-processed, individually wrapped garbage and less real, whole, nutritious food. You know, Tom says that his goal with Quest Nutrition was to end metabolic disease. So it kind of seems like that goal may have been less achieved than he anticipated. Anyway, this interview was just a few months ago. It is the worst interview I've ever seen, and it is a perfect thing to contrast with what he said in that post from January 30th. This is nothing out of the ordinary for this self-help personal development space. All their problems are always problems that they used to have. Everything is always fixed now. It's all fixed. They fixed it, okay? They can show you how to fix your brokenness too for a price. This is going to be split into multiple parts, probably. Not because I don't think you like long videos, but more because if I push it too long, it's going to push my average view duration higher. And then when I post something that's still long, but not as long, the YouTube Creator Studio is going to be like, yikes, your average view duration is down. This video is a flop. And I'm like, yeah, YouTube, maybe that's, I'm sure it's because my video sucks and not because, the video is shorter, so the duration is shorter. Like, nah. Let's go.
We as people have in some ways convinced ourselves that we are willing to stay inside of suffering that we know rather than facing the possibility of something new, because the knowns of that existing suffering feel predictable. And life wasn't meant for suffering. I mean, it doesn't mean that you're not going to have to go through hard times or bad times, but you can decide to push away from it. The challenge in pushing away, though, is that safe harbor is surrounded on all sides by fear. You are not going to eliminate fear just because you decide to be courageous. You're going to become prepared to face your fear, which is the thing that's necessary in that journey that has to go through it in order to become.
You are going to become prepared to face your fear, which is the thing that's necessary in that journey that has to go through it in order to become. What? Sir? What? That is not even, that does not make any sense. That was complete gibberish. And I remind you, well, not remind you, but I would like to point out that's the quote they chose for the coming up preview section. Like that was the little taste they're giving you to make sure it gets good. I told you it's the worst interview ever.
So we have to face our fear, or we will stay stuck. We will stay inside of this familiar place, the comfort zone, the suffering we know, at the expense of who we could become.
Dave Hollis, welcome back to the show, man.
Thank you for having me back, Tom. So good to be here.
So good to have you. I read the new book, Built Through Courage, absolutely fantastic. In it is a really powerful idea, which is basically the word built, like that we can create something of ourselves. But what I liked about the context of the book is it's really, in fact, I'll sum it up with a quote that you put in the book, which I think is fantastic, from Tyler Durden, which is, "It is not until we've lost everything that we can do anything."
Yeah.
What does that mean?
Dave, I know a divorce is difficult, but you have never even come remotely close to losing everything. In fact, you are perhaps one of the people least qualified to talk about what it is like to lose everything. You are one of the least qualified people I could think of.
And how does that become the foundation of the book?
Well, I think there's a through line of change as a thing that's a constant in our lives. There's change that we choose. We've become fed up with the status quo or normal, being okay with being okay. We decide that we're going to finally
Being okay with being okay.
create the courageous first steps in making that change a thing that gets us closer to who we're meant to be, or the version of what becoming looks like for us. And then there's the change that chooses us, in that we think we have some control. That illusion is a thing that we can connect to until we wake up one day and there's a diagnosis, there's a job that no longer exists, a relationship that ends. And in a
Okay, I don't know what the diagnosis he might be talking about is, but I kind of feel like that was a list. Like he lost, completely voluntarily quit his job at Disney. And then there's the divorce. I don't know, maybe I'm reading too much into this.
world where I had as the pillar, one of the biggest pillars of my identity, husband to Rachel, the change choosing me in this, the end of our marriage, was something that I now didn't know who I was in the absence of not being who I'd been. And in a world where we were also working together, that identity of what I did and what I thought I'd do for the rest of my life was something that in a single swoop was pulled out, and now required that I, in having been handed this blank piece of paper, go through the work of trying to fill out what next looked like. And I say in the book, and I've said,
you've been talking about this, you're becoming something, then the next, what does the future hold? Do you just keep asking that question and talking about how you don't know what it is, or do you have an idea yet? Because it seems like you don't, because it seems like you are so unsuited for this little industry. Not that that's a terrible thing to be unsuited for, but it seems to me that you don't even really enjoy it, so you don't even know what it is. You have no aspirations for it at all. You have no goal or anything, because it sounds like you've been spinning your wheels talking about how, it's the thing that I'm going to become, and blah, 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 blah. But like, it seems like you don't actually have the answer to that question yet, because you keep just talking about this over and over and over again.
said it plenty of times, it's both parts exhilarating and terrifying. At the beginning, it's way more terrifying than it is exhilarating. But that's part of what courage ends up being a required ingredient for turning the terrifying into the exhilarating. Because when you realize, there is no control, There's only the way that we respond to the circumstances that life presents, or the way that we, in choosing change, manufacture new events or a new road, a new map that we ultimately end up sailing off of. That still, because it ends up being different than something we've previously been familiar with or gotten the hang of or have comfort with, requires courage to step into it.
It's the whole idea of having to lose things first I find really interesting. And I don't know if I remember when Fight Club came out and the way that it felt and the sort of, I don't know, it made me feel more attached to it. But I lived in the building that in the beginning, he showcases and he describes the building and all. I don't know if he intentionally took it from the brochure, but it's so specific to how they marketed that building that my guess is that he did.
Yeah.
And so he's describing a building I actually lived in and like all the ways about how modernity has sort of trapped us in this thing. And then he blows it up. And so there was this sense of, I don't know, it was a real cultural moment. And you going through a divorce so publicly has that same kind of interesting ring of like, and now let me show you the process.
No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. If you think that's the comparison to make between Fight Club and Dave Hollis, that's not it.
Of building up. So if Fight Club takes a far darker look at, the process of creative destruction, your life and the book specifically is this really interesting take on the beautiful side of creative, or the creative opportunities that come from destruction.
Yeah.
Walk me through, like, as things are falling down.
When has Dave ever been remotely creative? Seriously. When? Anybody? No? Okay.
Around you, I'm sure your first instinct is to try to hold it together. When did you first get the sense of maybe actually letting this fall down is the right place to start?
It took a while, to be honest, because I initially was very much in this, well, let's do the work to fix it. Is there some way that we can keep this thing that has been put on the table from happening?
Ooh, I know. There might be some kind of conference you could go to. Oh, wait, shit. That was your conference. My bad. Oops.
And it was evident very early on that, this is a decision that has been made. There is no negotiating, as it were. And
listen, Dave, I know it feels sudden for you. I know it felt sudden for you. But the time for negotiating or for preventing it, see, it passed you by while you thought that you had this in the bag. It passed you by because you weren't paying attention and you weren't listening.
Was a thing that took time for me. And the reality was, in part, one of the first casualties in my life was my imagination.
Whoa.
Because in this thing that I didn't think could happen, having happened, the vision that I'd had for so long of what the rest of my life would look like and who I'd be with and where we'd live and the way that we do work, it being gone made my ability to see what is not even 5 years from now, what is a year from now. I had a compromised imagination. It was gone. And you
had a sense of that loss.
Oh yeah, no, I was acutely aware of this inability for me to forecast anything beyond what was now a survival mode of sorts of, I just got to get through tomorrow. Like, I was in deep grief, just deep grief. And in that sadness of now letting go of what I'd previously thought things might look like, I was trying to find something that I might connect to that would allow me to recultivate or respark that imagination. And the place I had to start, to be honest, was really getting intimate with my fear. Because most of why my imagination had been lost was because there was so much fear around trying to figure out something that I'd never contemplated.
So that becomes like a screaming voice in your head that stops you from seeing things?
Yeah, well, I mean, I ended up having this conversation with fear where I was trying to understand, what is it? What are the things that are inside
And
of
the
me?
reason you feel the need to have this conversation is it's ever present and you don't like it?
It's ever present, and it is 100% inhibitor from me being able to see anything hope-filled. It's hard for me to see the exhilarating part of the choose your own adventure narrative that I am suggesting I believe exists, but I can't connect to.
All right, so sit me down in that moment. So I've known you before divorce through.
Did he actually just have to use a metaphor to describe making choices in life as choose your own adventure books? Like, God, it's like, dude, what are you talking about? Like, what does any of what you're saying actually mean? What is a conversation? It sounds like you're just describing anxiety, dude. Like, and if you are prepared to come out here and say that all you need to do for anxiety is have a conversation with it or whatever, then let's just add that to another thing that you are actively harming the people who hear you speak by doing. The super important thing to keep in mind here is this was like 3 months ago that this was uploaded. I don't know if how long before it was uploaded the interview was shot, but it can't have been that long. So in just a few months, and while he is going around selling his book Built Through Courage that is $18, about how it's going to change your life, it's going to make your life so much better, he's telling people who are unemployed and are struggling with finances and struggling to find a job, he's telling them that the number one thing, he's got the best advice, you need to buy his book, okay? Saying all of these things, and then like 3 months later, he posted that thing that he posted on Instagram. After he just lied to everybody for money, he was prepared to sell that conference that was gonna teach you all about how to get to where you're becoming, or whatever the hell, or some mishmash of those words. But and this is how it works in the self-help personal development industry. No one has all the answers. And if someone's problems are just forever in their past, I would be suspicious of that. I would be very suspicious of that, especially if it seems like they're always kind of keeping the dice rolling. Like there will be a little problem that's kind of visible, and they'll be like, oh yeah. Well, now I've worked through that, and it's like, oh, you worked through that in like a week? Okay. Yeah. And I'm not saying that Dave has never gone through anything difficult. Divorce is really difficult for pretty much everybody who gets divorced. But not everybody who goes through something difficult starts offering themselves up as an expert who can help you go through the hard things in life, and charges these people money for your supposed expertise. So that's the difference here. I fail to see what credentials you have to claim yourself as being this expert, because you keep pointing out the divorce. Well, it looks like your credibility on that is shot to hell, because now you've just basically admitted that you hadn't processed shit this entire time, all while you were going around doing interviews, promoting your book, saying that, oh yeah, you totally processed it. You created your own Candyland board and moved your little shippy ship around it and shit like that, okay? But lo and behold, the truth comes out again. So how many conferences out of how many have you sold that then later got catastrophically exposed? Let's see, there's the Rise Together conference. Can we include CronCon in that? I think we can. So, you know, it's really looking like every time you have some big sales pitch and some new angle, it's only a matter of time before the house of cards comes tumbling down on that one, just like it is right here with you having to admit to, I would hope, nobody's surprise that you were actually sad and not happy. You know, I mean, our first clue was the just torrents of sadness emanating from your eye sockets every minute of every day, but okay. Jesus, let's continue.
Through divorce, after divorce, and there's no doubt that we all sort of present things to the world, but you, from the outside, you handled it extraordinarily well. And that doesn't mean that you didn't process grief and cry and all that, but it's really interesting. I think...
Okay, but Dave cries all the time. Like, he cries about, like, everything. I don't know if it's some kind of, like, manipulative tactic that he learned, you know, at some point. That's what it seems like to me. But... Okay, so it's not special that he cried.
Having read the book, I'm going to step back. You are intriguing to me because you don't see yourself the way that I see you. And while there's no doubt...
Same. Dave doesn't see himself the way that I see him. But I feel like Tom and I are kind of on opposite ends of the old 9-volt though.
That you know yourself better than I know you. The thing that you've had to like fight and claw to earn your own respect around is from the outside so self-evidently impressive about you. So in the book, you're like, I mean, built through courage, like, you know, you got to step outside your comfort zone, but I'm the guy that always gets trapped by my comfort zone. No, you're not. You're the guy that, for whatever reason, is constantly able to reinvent. Like when I hear you describe what you did in the corporate world, how many times you took different jobs and just said yes before you knew what was going on. But every time it's hard for you.
That's what I tell my grinder prospects.
There's a manual on how to get through this. So now, as we sit down with you in that fear, I want to know how, because most people, they're lost in that forever. Okay, I've known plenty of people, They get divorced and 25 years later, they're still stewing in that same space they were 2 months after the divorce.
Well, it hasn't been 25 years yet, so you gotta give him a chance to get there. He'll get there, trust me. We're like what, like 2 years now, running up on 2 years, and he hasn't advanced 1 inch from where he was because he's been, you know, blocking that all out with Heidi.
You've already made some pretty extraordinary leaps, begun to put things back together. But if you sit me down in that moment of fear where you can't see...
Which things has he put back together? Dave doesn't know how to repair shit.
Anything hope-filled. What's the first thing that you grab a hold of that allows you to begin to construct a context for how to move forward?
The first thing was truly getting to a place of acceptance, right? Like I was in denial that this was even happening. It felt like I was in the upside down, that like the Matrix is a thing now. Like, is this the simulation? I've, in some ways at the beginning, convinced myself that there was the possibility that this wasn't even real.
Really?
Oh yeah, because it didn't make sense. And then I got to a place of, no, this is real. You have the responsibility to parent these 4 kids. You have the responsibility to show up for your life. How are you going to do it? And the question I started asking,
you're going to do it like a crazy person on Instagram Live,
was, What did I need to just become the version of who I'd hoped to be 90 days from now? Right? Like the first thing I had to do was really shrink the window of my forward-looking vision casting, where I'd been a person doing 5 and 10 years. Here's where I'm going to be, and I could just, like a movie playing in my head, describe what it was going to look like. I needed to understand, what did I need.
That must be nice though, like having the ability to like to me that is utterly, and I mean maybe it's just because I've, as you know, like I've been sober for 3 years, but like maybe it's that type of tumultuous event in my life that makes me in a way kind of envious of the ability to even begin to predict what the next 5 years looks like. I don't know what next year looks like. I'm just kind of seeing how it goes. God damn it. I don't know. Is that normal? Like, I don't know. I feel like having everything, I feel like at a certain point, having very much of a plan out 5 years is kind of a little bit of a waste of time, because I mean factors are going to change. Stuff changes, like and then you're going to feel locked into like whatever you decided on for your 5-year thing, I feel like. Or, you know, maybe you don't feel locked into it, but you also just kind of wasted a lot of time. I don't know. And it could make it a little bit distressing for you that you've really gotten into this plan, and then when factors inevitably do change, it's gonna kind of throw you off kilter, I feel like. But whatever, you're gonna end up like Dave. No, I'm just kidding. You won't end up like Dave. I didn't mean to scare you.
Need to do today to get myself just 90 days into the future. And for me, it ended up going through the question of health. How might I, in the 5 dimensions that I've identified as being important for me in health, mental, emotional, spiritual, relational, and physical health, how might I have 2 or 3 things for each of those dimensions of health every day that might become part of my routine and part of what ends up being my set of habits that will allow me to create just enough inertia from this now standing still. I describe a sailboat in the book that is waiting for wind, right? Like, okay, I got to at least build the sail. I got to put it up so that when the wind starts to come, I'm actually prepared to move forward. And so for me, it was, all right.
Do you have oars? Like maybe if you start rowing, you Jesus Christ. So you're just, I mean, I don't know how long it takes to set up, you know, for a pretty basic, for like a sloop. I don't know how long it takes to put up the sail, but I can't imagine it taking more than like maybe maybe an hour or 2, maybe. I gotta think, you know, I mean, maybe not for like a sailboat yacht or anything, but like for like a sloop or something, it probably doesn't take that long. So maybe you also should be looking for the oars. You know, maybe you're in the wrong path. Maybe the wind is being blocked by like, you know, nearby terrain on shore or something, and you need to get into the path of the wind. Okay. Like, see, when you keep talking about these, you know, nautical metaphors, even though you don't know shit about how to actually do anything with your hands, or let alone how to sail a boat, it makes you sound like an idiot. And it makes it sound like, why did you pick this metaphor? Why didn't you pick something that you knew more about? Like, you could have made like corporate metaphors and we would have understood that better, okay? At least then it wouldn't sound like you're trying to make yourself sound like someone who works with his hands and who like knows all kinds of outdoor shit and who knows all kinds of survival skills or something, because I'm like, you're just not that, okay? It's not believable. But actually, you know what? Let's examine those 5 dimensions of health, okay? So it was mental, sure. Emotional. So, did your emotional health routine consist of pretending to be happy on social media really poorly? Is that what that was? Was that your emotional health routine? Okay. Spiritual. Is it a spiritually healthy belief to think that God spent more time on you than on other people? Relational, really? You've been in a pathetic rebound relationship that clearly makes both of you miserable for over a year, dude. You entered that rebound so fast that your watch was probably a couple seconds off from the time dilation caused by moving at relativistic velocity. And physical. Dave, you've spent the past almost 2 years literally killing yourself. I'm not being hyperbolic or metaphorical with that. You have spent almost 2 years accelerating toward an early death with your uncontrolled escalating alcohol abuse, not to mention the physical toll from sleep deprivation and excessive travel. Alcohol abuse, it never starts off serious. Nobody says, I would like to begin drinking habitually in a routine that could be described as a big deal. Okay, you don't take the first, second, or 15th drink because you are really bored with the high quality sleep you've been getting and you're hoping sleeping fitfully for a few hours at a time, night after night after night after night after night, will really bring some novelty and excitement to your life. You don't take a sip because you want to feel the joy of routinely hearing those you love say, damn it, name, or out of curiosity to know what the facial expression of those who love you looks like when they're deciding if they can handle any more of the pain of watching you continue to hurt yourself. But that's where it's going. And it is where it will go if you do not take recovery seriously. It will. It's a matter of time. You know, we addicts always think we are so goddamn clever, but we're not. You always think you're the exception. You know, for you, it's different. Here's a tip. You're not the exception, and it's not different. If you don't believe me, alcohol will be more than happy to prove it to you. You know. I mean, I can't force you. No one can force you to take it seriously. It's, you know, no one will ever change until they are ready to change. And that's just the way that is. But it drives me nuts seeing such a predictable pattern of behavior, where they're clearly just trying to smooth over this thing that cannot really be smoothed over. They're trying to keep everything just the way that it was. But it's not going to. Eventually it's going to give way.
What do I need in my mental health? Well, I needed to see professional freaking help on the regular. I mean, I was talking to a therapist a couple times a week because I didn't understand.
Does that seem like a lot to you, a couple of times a week? A lot of times when you're in a really serious situation, especially if, you know, it's an addiction situation, which I realize you were not addressing yet here, but a lot of times it's even more than twice a week. Like, I mean, when you're first getting that help for a serious issue, you know, a lot of times it's more frequent than that, or, you know, you have other programs in place or whatever, just because sometimes just having yourself occupied more can be really good for you, or like at least having yourself in a therapeutic space can be just good rather than having you be, you know, on your own at such a vulnerable time.
Understand why I was thinking what I was thinking, why I was feeling what I was feeling, and that interaction created a little bit of inertia.
You didn't understand it, or it was erratic? 1 minute, I can make it. The next minute, no, I'm never going to.
Both. I didn't understand the way that the voice in my head was being so critical of not having had this thing that was so important work out. I'm just an achiever by nature. I've had success in career. I've had success in a whole host of things. And yet I couldn't at the time see that my marriage not working out wasn't a success. My marriage was a success. It just was the end of my marriage in what had been, or the end of our relationship in what had been, as we've now transitioned into something new. But at the beginning, I saw it as a failure, that I somehow had failed. And I was really, as I'm sitting with my therapist or having a conversation through podcasts or books with myself, trying to understand what could you have done differently, or what are you meant to learn from this? And some of that work, would allow me just a little breadcrumb. Now I'm taking one step closer to an answer that over what now is almost 2 years worth of time had me really come to appreciate I am who I have become, not in spite of what happened, but because of what happened. And that as much as I had this bold declaration at the end of 2019, 2020 is going to be my best year ever. I have publicly declared that 45 was the year of my life, that I was waiting for this best year to happen. And what I couldn't appreciate then, that I see so clearly now, is that I was not ever going to be the person who could dictate the conditions that would bring my best forward. Right? And so, if in some ways I brought on some of what ends up happening in 2020, I apologize for the pandemic and anything else I may have been responsible for. I don't think that for real. But I also, right, I prayed that certain things that happened would never have happened, and I was doing so at the expense of how that cause and effect relationship produced the best.
I don't understand what you're saying. What are you?
Wouldn't have been brought to my knees in a way that brought me closer to my spiritual walk. I wouldn't have had the way that this divorce created closeness with my kids, the kind of relationship that comes out of it. I wouldn't.
Yeah, get a life.
Have spent the kind of time in physical transformation, really.
Which your physical transformation is crazy. Crazy.
No, thank you. But
I don't know when the last time Dave saw his children was, but it's been a while. He's seeing Heidi's children more often than his own. So, it's really really improved his relationship with his children. So see, it's just a pack of lies,
it is, moving my body and pushing myself to do things physically has been an exercise.
As long as it's not in open water.
In showing myself that I can do things that go beyond what I believed myself to be capable of.
In a pool.
So that I could take that experience in the physical realm and believe it in the mental and emotional realm. Oh, you can also handle things mentally, or you can handle things emotionally that go wildly beyond what you believed yourself to be capable of, because you now have proof, you have evidence in this other part of your life.
Dude,
you have evidence that you'll need to get rescue.
Transformation is the most underutilized mental transformation tool ever. And the number of people that I've seen, whether it's in business, whether it's, in something like a divorce or your career or whatever, where when you show yourself that you can set an intention, go and lift a progressively heavier weight, and your body actually changes, you look different, you feel different, and you can actually pick up heavier things, like that, there's something that goes on of oh, what if the same thing is happening in my mind? You can't see it in such a tangible way. But when you go through a physical transformation like that, it really does leave you with something truly profound.
Yeah, there is something too. I've described myself as a recovering fixed mindset person, and yet the attribution of growth in a gym or inside of the physical realm was never anything that I would have indicted myself for not being good because I was not already someone who could lift a certain amount of weight. But the ability to connect dots and see, oh yeah, you can continue to grow in this space. You can grow, whether it's muscle or endurance or stamina, recovery. All these things have been things that have changed the way that I think about growth in every aspect of my life, not just the physical realm, which is part of why it's so powerful.
All right, so things are crumbling down around you. We're in grief. We can no longer attach to hope. And we realize, okay, I have these 5 pillars in my life. And in the book, you have a really great quote that I think is what all this is hanging on, which is the antidote to fear is a plan. And I thought that was brilliant, It's absolutely true. The same idea I sum up by saying that action cures all. If I'm super anxious about something, all I need to do is start dealing with the problem head on, like just go start actually executing against it, because it does that same thing. It puts your brain in a problem-solving mode instead of just looping over that it is a problem.
If that's your solution, then you don't have anxiety.
All right, so we're there. We recognize that the antidote to all of this is going to be getting a plan. We chunk our life up into pieces.
Was that your last resort?
We start putting goals in each of those areas. The cool thing about the Tyler Durden quote that you have in the book is that it has this open-ended question of, if you can now do anything, what's the anything you want to do? So how did you begin to like put that together? The whole vision that you'd had for 45 years is gone. What do you start to piece together, and how do you do it?
So for me, there were two very, very big things that were somewhat of a departure from who I'd been as a more pragmatic, practical person. I began, even though your introduction of me having been someone who's taken more chances or put myself out of my comfort zone is the greatest compliment and something I probably don't see enough in myself.
Yeah.
I have
You can finish this blowjob later, Dave.
been in a season of yes, like just radical yes, so that if opportunity presents itself for me to do something that I have not previously done, that might publicly embarrass me, that I will fail wildly and spectacularly.
When have you ever failed publicly and actually like not denied that you failed? Okay, so I'm thinking, let's see. Your marriage, you've said that is no longer qualifying as a failure. Let's see, the triathlon, nope, you denied that was a failure. You specifically refused to use the word failure with that. Okay, well, you did try to hold that conference and then you canceled it. Oh, wait, you actually literally didn't even mention that publicly that it was canceled. You're not even making a statement about it. Okay, so when have you ever failed publicly and owned up to it? When? You haven't. You never have. You've never been a strong enough person or a person with enough integrity to do that, because you can't even when you've so clearly failed and everybody knows that you have, you simply are unable to take that accountability. And it's over and over and over and over and over and over again. And that's what happens when you are just trucking through, powering through with this self-help personal development nonsense. It is so toxic, it's so harmful, and just looking at everything he's saying here, comparing that to that statement that he made, like, what happened? So basically everything he said for the past 2 years has been straight up lies that he's charged people for, and that people have thought was good, was reliable advice for helping their own lives. And that's the fucking problem, and that's why there's no problem with running up the score right now, all right? That's where we're gonna split this. We'll be back to finish up some other choice moments in this worst interview ever very soon, probably sooner than you think. I've been Mac. Peace out. Bye!